Xbox is holding up the release of Dune. Star Wars Outlaws has cost Ubisoft 10% of its value. And Concord gets canned. Welcome back to 128KB News. This is your quick bit of gaming news where we catch up in the world of gaming this week in this short news-like video. Still not a good catchphrase, I know. But in the biggest news story of the week in gaming, Andy has been fired. He is no longer the co-host of 128KB News because I want the limelight to myself. I'm that much of an egomaniac. And anyway, onto the actual stories, and that is that Fallout 76 requires you to have a full download of the game. So the long-awaited expansion for Fallout 76 drops this week, bringing a huge raft of new events, expansions and updates to the game. And in an attempt to better optimize it, Bethesda have decided what the best thing to do is just have you re-download the entire game. Now this has obviously got a lot of people quite worried because it's unclear as to what this means for your customized and saved progress. Things like photos, screenshots, and of course those loading screens that you can customize. Will they still be present after this full download? Well, Bethesda's support have been suitably vague, so we won't actually know until Fallout 76 Milepost Zero actually rolls out. But by the time this video goes out, it will be live, so the early adopters will be able to tell us. It will hopefully, though, properly optimize the game, which its install currently sits over 110 gigabytes, which is ridiculously big. So the idea of this new update is to obviously better optimize this and bring the file size for Fallout 76 down to a more manageable size. But moving on to the second story of the week, and this kind of flew under the radar a little bit, and that is a classic platformer is coming back, and that is Croc. We're getting a full remaster of Croc, The Legend of Gobos, which, as you can see behind me, is one of my favourite platformers from the PS1 era. I played this game a lot, so this news has got me pretty hyped. It's definitely one of the more underappreciated platformers from the PS1 era. It came out on PS1, PC, and I think Sega Saturn at that time. It's getting a full remaster launching later this year on PC and all console platforms, and that includes Nintendo Switch from what I can tell anyway. And this game really does feel like it was kind of tailor-made for that Nintendo Switch audience. It's got that platform feel to it. I think it's going to be a really good addition to that platform when it does drop. But I'm personally quite excited for this. I'd love to know what you think, and if you did play the original Croc way back in 1997, and yes, you will be showing your age. And let's move things along to a slightly juicier story, and that is that the Xbox Series S is holding back the release of the new Dune game. Funcom, the developers, have come out and said about their struggles optimizing the game for the Xbox Series S, and this has led to them releasing this game on PC first and waiting for the Xbox release to come at a later date. In a recent interview, Funcom have said that there's lots of challenges we need to do before we release on Xbox, but yes, the Series S is the challenge. Unreal does a lot of the work for us in some ways. What we're doing in terms of optimization of assets, using various technologies, be it FSR or something else to replicate frames. We want the game to look stunning on a high end, whether you have a 3070 or a 4090, but we also want it to look good. I don't think we've released our spec yet, but you know, powerful cards from a few years ago should be able to run the game and it should look good, but you won't be able to leverage the ultra high specs, but it'll still look nice. So Funcom are obviously alluding to the fact that the Series S is the big stumbling block when it comes to releasing this game on console. Now, it's not the first time we've heard this from developers, and it certainly won't be the last. The Series S is always the limiting factor with the Xbox family, and truly, I don't know what Xbox can do about this. They've kind of painted themselves into the corner by having this budget console, and bar dropping the Series S from the family entirely, I don't see any logical way out of it for them, but obviously they're not going to do that. So developers are just going to have to struggle with a more limited development for Xbox in the future, and we're just going to see more and more of these problems as games become more and more demanding. And talking of demanding games, let's look at the response that has been received for Star Wars Outlaws, which is now out, and it has a pretty lukewarm and tepid response. And yes, lukewarm is my pun of the day. Stamp that bingo card. The Metacritic scores are in for Star Wars Outlaws, and the user scores aren't great. It's got a 4.9. The critic scores gave it a 76%, so a pretty good score. And from what I've seen of the game, that seems a fairly reasonable score. I'm not sure that it should be as low from the user scores, but obviously that's up to every individual. But worryingly for Ubisoft is the response that this has had from the financial side of things. They've downgraded their sales forecast by a full 2 million units for Star Wars Outlaws, down to 5.5 million by the end of March next year. And in response to that, that has caused the shares for Ubisoft to drop by a full 10% to a 10-year low. It's a kind of incredible reaction to the game that it can have that much of a knock-on effect, but I suppose you've got to consider how much the game costs to make and how much that Ubisoft are going to have to pay Disney for the licensing of the game too. From my experiences of the game and from Andy's experiences who's been playing it fully, I think it's a pretty harsh response. It seems like it's exactly the game that we were all promised and expecting. It seems like a fairly decent game. It's not Game of the Year material, certainly, but it's a fair game. It's definitely a good 70-80% game, and I definitely would enjoy it, but it seems it's fallen slightly lower of the expectation of the mark of users, and as a response, it's definitely not going to sell as much, and that's had a huge knock-on effect for Ubisoft. But talking of not meeting expectations, let's move on to the main story of the week, and everyone's talking about it. It dropped the other night, and that is that Sony have shut down Concord in less than 10 days of operation. The game that flopped from the start has now been canned. It is, of course, just 2 weeks after the launch, and Sony have announced that they are going to refund all customers on every platform that the game is released. Obviously, that includes Steam and the PlayStation digital front. Kind of worryingly, they were a bit unclear about people that bought it physically. I'm not sure how many that is, but there are some. They've just said that you're going to have to go to the retailer you bought it from to get your refund. That sounds a bit sketchy, but in truth, it's not going to be that many people because the reports are they only sold 25,000 units in total across all platforms. That is a huge failure considering that this is a multi-year development, and estimates are that it cost around $200 million to make this game. I'm not sure what they were spending the money on, but it was clear that this game wasn't going to be a success from the start. We all saw it when it was announced. There was this huge cinematic kind of trailer for it that looked like they were going to be introduced to this exciting new IP, maybe a new action-adventure game that we had not seen before. And then we saw the gameplay after 4 minutes of being teased, and we realised it was yet another arena shooter. And the reactions were just, they weren't even tepid, they were negative from the start. We just knew that this was going to be a flop, so it wasn't even a surprise when it happened. The surprises are where we see that it had less concurrent players than the Gollum game, which I find absolutely amazing. What this means for Firewalk Studios is still unclear. It's their first major release, but they are a PlayStation-owned studio, so hopefully PlayStation will absorb the losses and allow Firewalk to carry on to make another game, because clearly they're a talented team, because the actual physics and the mechanics of the game itself was solid. It was just the premise and another arena shooter in a very saturated marketplace. But for me, the highlight of this entire story comes when you head over to YouTube and go on to the gameplay trailer for Concord itself. Pause the trailer because it's not worth watching, and do yourself a favour, scroll down and just read some of the comments. I want to take a second to enjoy them myself, because the most entertainment that can come from this game is in the comments from the trailer. I know Sony gets a lot of hate, but personally, I don't think they get enough of it. The pitch was like, want to shut down some studios? Concord looks like one of those fake games that played in the background of a movie or a TV show. Watching that trailer was free, but I still want my money back. It just goes on and on. How generic do you want the game? Answer: yes. Do yourself a favour and go there. Spend 5 minutes. It will be the most entertaining 5 minutes you ever spent. Probably more entertaining than being here. So it's a really unshocking story, but Concord has been canned. We all knew it was coming. I think the real surprise is that it happened so quickly and that they were so quick to hold their hands up and admit defeat in this. We were kind of expecting that it would happen, that they would put an announcement out saying, sorry, this game didn't meet expectations, but they would kind of leave it there for a year or so to slowly die out. But no, in under 2 weeks, they've canned it. Full refunds for everyone. Hopefully, if you've been caught up in this, you will get a refund too. but there's only 25,000 of you in the world, so the chances are that you're watching this is pretty slim. But if you are, go down in the comments and let me know. Or if you are kind of hilariously unsurprised at this, do so as well. And whilst you're down there digging around, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel to support my solo work. Now Andy's not here anymore. And then maybe before you go anywhere, watch another video from us over here at 128KB. We're a lovely bunch and we love you being here too. So until the next time, I'll see you next time. Do you like being stared at? Ooh, bah, boo, boo, bah, bah, boo, boo. I don't know what's happening anymore. Bah.